Hey everybody, welcome to the New Market Alliance Church podcast, where you're invited to not just attend church or watch church or, in this case, listen to church, but actually go and be the church. For everything you need to know about our community, be sure to go to newmarketalliance.ca and maybe even drop us a line to let us know you're listening. We read everything you send and we'll be sure to get back to you. Our worship service happens every Sunday at 10 a.m. in person or streaming online. We want you to know you absolutely matter to God, and you absolutely matter to us. Everyone is welcome and wanted. Now, let's join today's teaching.
We're in this series called Christmas Unfiltered, and it's a series we're sort of digging into the Christmas story for things maybe we haven't known. Hopefully, things that will mark this season in deeper and more meaningful ways. And we looked at what we thought we knew about Mary and Joseph, what we thought we knew about the birth of Jesus. And I guess if there's a theme to be found, I want you to pick up in this Christmas story, this nativity is not a perfect Hallmark scene or a pristine, perfect moment with halos and a sterilized storybook version. It was often dark and dirty and dangerous and messy. And I guess I don't need to tell you that our lives are messy too sometimes. So let's be real about the Christmas story. Let's be real about our own story. Today I want to look at what we thought we knew about Jesus' reception, the moments and months following his birth, how he was welcomed, embraced, or in some cases, none of the above. You know, we think of shepherds in the field, wise men from the east, angels in the sky, everybody happy, everybody celebrating. But there's a part of the story that often doesn't get covered, and it reflects a lot on how people still respond to Jesus. And it's not something you'd ever want to put on a Christmas card. It's captured in a man by the name of Herod. And remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago. There are two Herods in the Bible, both part of the Herodian dynasty. It ruled Judea, still part of the Roman Empire. First, there was Herod Antipas, who you think he's the guy beheaded John the Baptist, when Jesus was about 30 years old. But then there's Herod the First, or Herod the Great. He was the ruler of Judea at the time of the birth of Jesus, and that's who I want to look at. So if you just follow along with me from the first Gospel of Matthew, this is what it says about the life of Jesus in the Bible. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Now let's just stop there. This part of the Christmas story takes place sometime after the birth itself, but before Jesus was 2 years old. Joseph, Mary, and Jesus were still in Bethlehem, sometime between 6 and 4 BC, because it happened just before the death of Herod, which we know took place in 4 BC, which, like I said last week, tells us with some degree of accuracy that Jesus was probably born around 4 or 5 BC. We talked, how December 25th isn't necessarily the actual date of Christ's birth. It's more based on tradition. It could be the 25th. The Bible doesn't say. But what I'm really interested in this verse is what's up with Herod? Why is Herod disturbed? And even more intriguing, why was all Jerusalem disturbed that Herod was disturbed? And it probably would help to have just a little background. Rome, of course, the great supreme power of the world, right? But after Julius Caesar, the Roman general and dictator who was assassinated in 44 BC, There was political turmoil. It left Israel in sort of upheaval. And Herod wanted to be its ruler. So he built a relationship with the Roman general Mark Antony, who, along with the Roman Senate, appointed King Herod to Judea in 40 BC, or at least more exact, they gave him permission to invade and assume control. So Herod gathered forces, and he was ruthless. For example, as part of his invasion, he encountered some freedom fighters in the caves of Arbel by the Sea of Galilee, and he wasn't able to get them through any kind of frontal assault. They were too well protected. So what did Herod do? He heated oil and poured it down the cracks and burned them alive. It was through those kind of barbaric means that Herod established control by 37 BC. And then when Mark Antony lost power to Octavian, Herod immediately dropped his relationship with Mark Antony, pledged allegiance to Octavian, who is better known to us as Caesar Augustus. In fact, just to give you a taste of how opportunistic Herod was, when he found out he could marry a teenage princess named Miriam, who would help him gain power, he immediately sent his current wife, Doris, and their 3-year-old son into exile. And that was the kind version of Herod, though. He murdered 2 of his wives. He killed 3 of his sons. Caesar Augustus had this sort of semi-famous quote about Herod. He said, "It would be better to be Herod's pig than his son." Kind of true. My favorite comedian, Norm Macdonald, used to recite off someone's evil biography, and then in this sort of understated way say something like, this guy's starting to sound like a real jerk. And Herod was more than a jerk. He was absolutely wicked, vile. In fact, when he was close to death, he knew there would be celebrations about his passing. So you know what he did? He ordered all the notable and respected leaders of Israel to come to Jerusalem, and he imprisoned them in the Hippodrome and gave soldiers orders that they be killed when Herod died, just so that there would be written in the history books that all of Israel mourned his death. You get in the picture what kind of dude this guy is? Ruthless, conniving, murderous, power-hungry person. And he's told by some traveling wise men that a new king of Israel was coming. And they just wanted directions so they could worship him and acknowledge his kingdom. And it disturbed Herod. And now you probably understand why everyone was disturbed, because Herod was disturbed. When Herod is disturbed, blood's going to flow. People are going to die. So what did he do? Let's go back to Matthew and find out. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. And that's how Herod responded to Christ. Now, before we write that off as the response of a crazy, sadistic tyrant, maybe we could just poke a little further at just what it was that threatened Herod about Jesus. And I suppose first, Jesus threatened his possessions. The Magi had come with gifts, not for Herod, but for this new king, Jesus. And Herod knew that was only the beginning. If he wasn't king, there wouldn't be wealth, the riches, the palaces, all of that goes with it. If there's anything that is dear to us, it's our stuff. There's almost these universal experiences with parents. Obviously, having kids is a gift. Babies are cute, which helps us sort of mitigate the crying and the sleepless nights and all of that. But it doesn't take too long before you become a bit of a theologian and you start truly believing in this idea of everyone being born with a sin nature. You literally don't have to teach your kid to be rebellious, selfish, disobedient. It comes pretty naturally. In fact, I think one of the first 10 words that kids learn after mama, dada, yes, no, the next word seems to be, especially if they have other siblings or playdates, mine. Mine. Oh no, Jonathan, in this home we share our toys. No, mine. We like our stuff. We don't want to give our stuff up. And it's not something we really grow out of, is it? To this day, in Israel, you can still see the many things and places that Herod constructed, monuments to his wealth and domain and ownership. But that's not all Jesus threatened. Jesus threatened Herod's power. Whoever was king had power. And with power comes authority and control. When you have power, no one can tell you what to do, how to live, what to think. You make up your own mind. You call your own shots. You determine your own course of action. And Herod didn't want anyone controlling his life but himself. If another king came along, let's say perhaps a rightful king, then he would have to let someone else lead. And I think that's one of the most difficult things about coming face to face with Christ, the question of leadership. I don't think most people stumble over the question of whether Christ was special or divine. I don't think most folks go searching for God and get all messed up about whether or not the Bible has value or wisdom for living. Where the trouble comes for most of us is coming face to face with the implications of having a leader, of giving over control, of letting someone else in the driver's seat. Cliff Nechtel, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He works with college students through InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And he goes around to various campuses and dialogues with students in various forms. And he had a book called Give Me an Answer. Cliff tells of dialoguing with a college student about the claims of Christ. And the student is intellectually intrigued. So Cliff challenged him to go home, read the prophecies about Christ in the book of Isaiah, and then read how they were fulfilled in great detail in the life of Jesus in the book of Matthew. So the next day, the student comes back. Cliff asked him, what do you think? And the student said, I think it speaks truth. Like, in fact, I was kind of blown away by how Jesus fulfilled those prophecies. And Cliff said, great. Are you open then to having Christ have a place in your life? Guy said, not really. I have a very active sex life. I know Christ would want to change that. I don't really want to change that. very few in history can match the kind of power that King Herod had. But I think all of us know the struggle of handing over the power of our future and our choices, our life direction to someone else, even someone who is inherently good and wise and loving. And that's still not all. Jesus also threatened Herod's position. Herod didn't want anyone else to receive honor, glory, all that comes with being king. He wanted to be high and lifted up, not someone else. Again, we relate on some level, don't we? Prestige, position, prominence. You know, when I was a little boy, we played the game of whose daddy was toughest, whose house was nicest, so on. And I tried to play it with the best of them. I forget who was telling me about this work convention, whether it was a doctor or dentist or salesman, where you experience that mingling and networking among professionals, and you sense the person you're talking to sort of, their eyes go glassy and they're sort of looking past you or through you. They're looking to see if there's someone more important or influential or prestigious in the lobby, kind of half listening to you and one eye checking to see if there's someone more worthwhile to be talking to. I was like, dang, that sounds a lot like pastor conferences, you know? I mean, that's a small example, but it's kind of part of the human condition. And for someone so narcissistic, so paranoid, so frankly demonic as Herod, it was even more blatant. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, there's an easy way to leave this story and a hard way. The easy way is to sort of keep Herod as this supervillain, keep him at arm's length, keep him almost like mythologically evil, like the Grinch or the Wicked Witch of the West or Voldemort or something. And then, you know, we can breathe a sigh of relief and, well, at least I'm no Herod, right? The hard way to leave this story is for me, perhaps for us, to come face to face with how much we can be like Herod. It's a little uncomfortable if we really think about how much we value power, possessions, position. We're a little more refined, a little less violent, I would hope. But how many of us would be honest enough to recognize we might be just as threatened by Jesus in those areas as Herod was? And just like Herod, I will often do things to remove Jesus from my life in those areas where I feel threatened. It's our sin nature, I suppose. Left to ourselves, we will try to remove, tear down that which would lead us where we don't want to be led. With what would control us where we don't want to be controlled, which is why the other folks in this part of the story are worth remembering and learning from. The wise men. Trick question. How many wise men were there, by the way? We don't know. I mean, most people think 3, probably because of the song. We 3 kings of Orient are. By the way, I knew a kid who thought, what a strange place to come from. Not Orient A or Orient B, but Orient R. Not a bright kid. What can I say? And maybe we think there were 3 because we know there were 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, myrrh. So whenever we see a pageant or a living nativity or anything, we have one bringing gold, one frankincense, one myrrh. So maybe there were 3, but the truth is, we don't know. And actually, the Bible doesn't even use the word king. Instead, it uses the word magi. And a magi was something like an ancient astrologer, but not the way we think of astrologers today, like with horoscopes and that kind of stuff. That's not at all what these guys were about. In fact, that kind of astrology is frowned upon in the Bible. So the Magi were more like scholars, intellectuals, who were more like astronomers, modern-day astronomers. These guys who, as part of their intellectual pursuits, had studied ancient scriptures, and through them, they knew that a Messiah, a Savior, a King, was coming to the world to change all of human history. And so they studied the heavens because the scriptures said his coming would be marked by this tremendous event, that the coming of a star that would mark the time and place of his birth. And then, to their amazement, it all began to happen in their lifetime. So they left their country in search of this wonder and the answers it would hold for their life. But they responded very differently than Herod. Let me read it. The star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with their gifts of gold and incense and of myrrh. See how this is just so radically different than how Herod responded. Instead of being threatened by his position or his power, they worshiped him. They bowed down. They bent the knee. They acknowledged his place over their life. You know, when I reflect on that, here's what they got that many times we don't. That bending our knee before Christ isn't about what we lose, which was Herod's fear. It's about what we gain. Think of it this way. When I board a plane, I gladly surrender control to the pilot. Rafi's here, right? I wish Rafi was my pilot all the time. But I have no desire to enter the cockpit and take controls and say, Rafi, just get a coffee. Just let me figure this out. Because I know Rafi is so much better equipped to guide and direct this aircraft. They are infinitely better qualified, and as a result, it is best to cede control to them. Now, by doing this, do I lose anything? No, I simply gain the benefit of his expertise. Why is this so difficult for us to see in relation to God? It's because when it comes to life, I insist on seeing myself as the pilot. You know those bumper stickers, Jesus is my co-pilot? Listen, Jesus is never meant to be relegated to co-anything. And frankly, a lot of us have relegated him to flight attendant, making sure our needs are met, that we're comfortable, that we have a blankie and a soft drink and a bag of pretzels. There's a sophisticated theological word for this. Justice will know it. It's called dumb. Isn't that the whole point of being led? Led by a good shepherd who actually leads his sheep? Herod is the way of self-rule. The Magi demonstrate God rule. But that wasn't the only thing they did differently. Not only did they bend the knee, they freely parted with wealth. Gold, frankincense, myrrh, things of great value and worth. Frankincense, along with myrrh, was used for making perfume and incense. Myrrh was also used by the Egyptians for the embalming process, and was this important medicine for sores and wounds. It's still used to this day in mouthwashes and toothpaste and makeup. Of course, gold is still one of the prized commodities of today, and until recently was actually the foundational currency of wealth. As of this past week, I checked up, $3,800 in Canada for just an ounce. These were not small gifts, but it was unthinkable to them to acknowledge the child as king, to acknowledge the babe in the manger as the savior of the world and not demonstrate it tangibly. That's why giving has marked the birth of Jesus to this day. What has changed is that the giving is not to Jesus, but to each other or to ourselves. What we miss in that is that it's in giving to Christ that we receive the most. There's this old legend surrounding the three magi as they made their way to Bethlehem over several weeks, maybe months. This is not in Scripture, by the way. This is just an oral legend that they came to the home of a poor woman, and she had a little boy who was crippled, and he couldn't walk without a crutch. And they asked to stay the night, and as they do, they tell the story of their quest and of the gifts they're bringing. Now, this little boy is so moved, but he's got nothing to give. But he's captivated by the coming of this child king. And so he asks the wise men if he can give a gift. The only thing he has to give that is his own, his only possession, his crutch. And so he gives it to them to lay at the baby's feet. And then the story goes, a miracle happened. As the wise men left with his crutch, the boy found he could stand and walk and run. He'd been healed. Now, whether that story is true or not, what is always true is that when we give, there is a gift in return, a blessing, particularly as we give to Christ. But we do not give for what we receive, but because of who he is, because he is worthy of it. That's what worship is, literally, worthship. Adoration of something or someone who is worthy of it. So 2 responses. One that welcomed Christ, one that didn't. And I suppose it's still our choice to make. In a second, we're going to ask you to stand during the course of this song. And maybe we'd even make it our prayer. What hope we had this starlit night. A king is born in Bethlehem. Our journey's long, we seek the light that leads to the hallowed manger ground. And we behold this offering exalted now, the King of Kings. Praise God for the hallowed manger ground. Emmanuel, the God who is with us. Jesus, teach me again this season how to respond to the birth of a Messiah. You are not my co-pilot. You are my king and shepherd and leader. And so I submit to you again. I resubmit to you today. I refocus my heart in your direction. King of kings, Lord of lords, for you alone are worthy. Emmanuel, God who's with us.